Cool. Welcome to another LLM Instance Gateway open source meeting. Just a reminder, we are following the CNCF Code of Conduct, and this meeting is being recorded and uploaded to YouTube. So please behave accordingly. Sweet. So jumping right in, there is not a whole lot on the agenda, but I think an important thing to call out. We did get the API proposal integrated last week, so that's nice. But as we're looking to integrate this, we're thinking about trying to have the controller of our LLM server pool object. I think we want that in different gateway implementations because each gateway might implement things slightly differently. As long as they support Xcode, we should be able to support this gateway. And so I just spun up an issue just a few minutes ago. I don't know why I did that. I will open this now. Hopefully we see the new tab. I can't see it. There we go. Okay, I see a mirror of my screen. So this issue is just meant to centralize conversation around the approach of extending existing gateway controllers, such as Envoy Gateway or Cilium, something like that, where we would extend that controller to reconcile upon an LLM server pool. Also extend HTTP route to support LLM server pool as a backend ref. You would need to do some specific things. I have an example PR of how we do that via Envoy extension policy and Envoy patch policy. We're proposing this method, and I mention this here because we think that it allows for a cleaner integration into gateways rather than us having to use these patch policies and making assumptions about best practices for different gateways. I could see a potential future being if we were to make our own gateway, we would have either a giant switch statement or these different implementations for each gateway to handle their specific nuances. So kind of flipping that model is what we're suggesting. Looking for input here, maybe Josh and Rob, others.
Yeah, I can go talk about this a bit. I've been thinking a lot about how we can integrate this into, Gateway API as a whole. I think we really want this model to be compatible with Gateway API, and ideally, as this evolves and stabilizes, we'll see most, if not all, Gateway implementations pick this up and support it as a new kind of backend that they support, kind of an alternative service. But what I think this discussion is really about is how do we get that initial momentum, that initial implementation out there that's a reference, right? It seems like we really want to have a reference implementation that is open source, is provides a compelling end-to-end solution, and is not just open source, but in some kind of CNCF owned project. So the examples that Kellen mentioned of Cilium, Envoy Gateway, we've chatted with maintainers there as examples of CNCF projects that implement Gateway API. That is not an exhaustive list. There are others, Contour, Knative, that Istio, that there are a bunch. Just the idea being that we want to have a implementation where we can really work through the early experimental versions of this API and test that out. There's a few variations you could have here. You could have a separate controller that basically just extends, on what we're doing today for the proof of concept is we are basically using Envoy patch policy, extension policy, kind of as Kellen mentions here in this issue, and that's fine for a POC, but ideally you don't want to have to deal with all that long term. You want for a reference implementation, people just to be able to use this as support of their gateway, as part of their gateway deployment. So this is going to be a bit of a collaborative process, working with maintainers of other projects to see who is most willing, interested, excited about us developing a this support in their implementation with them. TBD who this is, but when I've asked some other project maintainers, they basically wanted a description of what that work would be and what the ideas are. And so this is really just that starting point.
Agreed. And this, I expect to edit this issue and make it more detailed. This conversation is evolving. I just want to have something we could reference, a link I could reference in our doc. But yeah, I totally expect to revise this to be more detailed. Cool. And I just wanted to make sure, Jiashin, does this approach align with you? I reached out to you a little bit. Sorry about that.
Right.
Just making sure that this aligns with what you're thinking.
Yeah, let me try to like understand the proposal. Seems creating a like LLM server pool will create create that CR. The controller will create the external deployment service and the envoy extension policy and patch policy, right? That combination, right?
That's how we're currently doing it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea is that instead of that, the controller would natively support LLM server pool and would not need to create the extension policy or patch policy resources. They would just,
Right.
because in the case of Envoy Gateway, extension policy and patch policy are just ways to patch the Envoy config, essentially. And so this is looking for one or more controllers to support that natively. But I think this as a project, we want to have one specific controller that we're developing against. Other controllers can certainly, support this model as well. But at least for the early days, we just want to iterate on one controller, I think. So maybe that's Envoy Gateway, maybe that's Cilium, Contour, ISTI, I don't know. Yeah. We'll see which is best.
Yeah, one more question on the external scope. It seems like that's bind to this kind of the LL server pool will be the owner of those services and the configurations, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the idea is that every LLM server pool is conceptually similar to a service. It sits at the same layer as a service in Gateway API. It's a group of endpoints. And then you have an XProc extension that is responsible for that group of endpoints and basically selecting the endpoint that should be routed to. So that the real difference between this and a standard gateway implementation is, a standard gateway implementation will select the service and then do some kind of LB strategy, such as round robin, to select the endpoint. With this, we're saying we're going to have an XProc instance that is responsible for selecting the endpoint.
I think that part makes sense. But I'm trying to see if we what's the best practice? Like could user just create like one like LLM server pool in the whole cluster or expect users to create more. So because I think the external like that the scope of the that service, the expansion service, that could the gateway can delegate all the routing decisions to one single like service, right? It doesn't have to be like.
We've made this like an assumption that an LLM server pool has a shared foundational model.
Yes.
So if you have,
Right. Okay.
yeah, so that is the main, deciding factor, how many LLM server pools you would typically create. It's possible that you might want to create it also per, I don't know, like maybe you will have some like, heterogeneous hardware, but in some cases that might not make sense. So you might have a different LLM server pool for a specific hardware type. It really depends on the use case.
Right. I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. Best practices around LLM server pool is a great question. Base model is a good differentiator, but also breaking it down further, it's which use cases do you want to have sharing compute? We do configure priority and fairness, but it ultimately comes down to a question of what do you want to have sharing, because there will be decisions that need to be made there. So I could see a model. I could see many users using a single pool. But some sophisticated users might want multiple pools even when they have the same shared base model. But single shared base model is probably the best rule of thumb.
Right, and okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. And if we have like multiple like external proc servers for that for different like pools, so that means okay, so the gateway will talk to different when you get the models back, it talk to different external proc get the decisions, right?
Yeah, so exactly. So the idea is that so if you're familiar with gateway API structure at all, each route can route to one or more services, or in this case, server pools, basically. So you can imagine /completions goes to a server pool or set of server pools. The reason it might be more than one server pool is you might be doing some traffic splitting. Like let's say you're replacing one server pool with another server pool that maybe has a updated model server framework or something like that. You're wanting to do a very, like you think of canary rollouts and how they work today in Kube, where you have service v1 and service v2. You may want to have the same thing for a server pool where you're upgrading the underlying framework, base model, a variety of things, right? And in that case, you may want to support basically splitting between different pools as part of the rollout.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think comparing to a global like extension service, the benefits is like we can talk about the pros and cons, right? I think the pros is it probably have higher like availability at the global layer. One extension goes down, it just affect the one model. And technically the code can be reused, and different service just have different base models just have different like the configurations, I would say. But
Exactly.
those in some of the like the router setting,
Whitney, I think you may be accidentally off mute.
Whitney, I'm going to mute you. You can unmute if you were going to participate, but I think it's a leaky mic. Sorry, Yashin, go ahead.
right, so for some of the router settings, they move such configuration at the global level to that to me, I feel the configuration part is kind of equivalent, right? Like the global extension server can read the model specific configs and apply, because it knows all the traffics and the targets, it can apply those like specific configurations. So that part is good. So the cons is every model we have separate ones. Unless I'm not sure if that's redundant. Right. I don't have very strong opinions here. I'm trying to understand what's your thought, underneath comparing to the global one. If we think because I think the reliability is not a big issue for NY itself, right? So if that's the case, like what's the pros and cons from your side? Like make it like a kind of like a hierarchy, right? Like global gateway talks to different like extension server comparing to one global like extension server.
I can hop in there. I'm sure Rob will have an opinion too, but my thought is we don't know how big your LLM server pools are going to be. So because we're doing some body-based routing, and we may potentially do more sophistication. Not that body-based routing is sophisticated, but it is expensive. If we do a single global XProc, I think there could be performance concerns as you start to scale up. That was my main concern with wanting to separate it. And then you're affecting your entire, in that, whatever's behind this gateway, you're affecting your entire LLM serving rather than just this specific pool. Rob, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, the vision I have, it's kind of similar to what Joshin was saying earlier too. You want this hierarchy of availability, right? You imagine a gateway that might be regional or global or some variation of that. And then what we've been working towards is this idea that each XProc instance is probably either zonal or regional, right? So that even if you have multiple XProc, like multiple zones behind a single server pool, you would have an XProc instance per zone, for example, just to really work on that availability and isolation, or per region, all right? But trying to ensure that we're providing that high availability, I would agree that I think this is probably going to be fairly reliable anyways, but another aspect that we've been talking about is you can make these extensions, this XProc fail open. So in the sense that you don't have endpoint available at that given point in time, you're just going to get less than ideal routing behavior, but not full unavailability. So that kind of helps with the rollouts. And if you're wanting to replace your primary for the extension replica, XProc replica.
I think Jashin, your question is actually why not have like a single XProc across all LLM server pools for a specific like Envoy deployment. That was what you're comparing with, right, Jashin?
Right. Yeah. I think the availability part definitely makes sense. I mean, from the configuration part, we have separate instance and with different configuration with optimized like configurations. First, we have all those configurations as a global configuration. I cannot tell that much differences. But if the major selling point, I think the architecture change is for the availability or cross-region cross anyway, like the data center related like features. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like this is not tied to the API. I think any provider can choose. I don't know if we're making any strong assumptions that this is one-to-one with an LLM server pool. So you could, like a provider can choose to make it lower, but then their implementation needs to take into account that fact. Like in our API, the way that we are describing LLM server pool and LLM service or LLM use case, it doesn't make any assumption that the extension is going to be global or not.
Right.
Now, what we're proposing here is like if we are going to contribute something to, for example, Envoy Gateway controller is to have it per LLM server pool. Because of like, because we were able to shard at the LLM server pool like level, like each LLM server pool is going to have its own extension. And probably we're going to have queuing there. And so there's state. So it's probably going to be more scalable to do it this way.
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead. I think Tom raised a hand.
No, please continue. I think I have probably related but separate question. Please finish this.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right. I think consider it depends on the those logics inside the extension server, right? Whether we need sharded or not, because in most of like GPU clusters, like pod level scale or cluster level scale is not a big issue because like the 1,000 GPU nodes probably just take like a few hundreds past. I think scalability is not the major concern. But that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I think there's some advanced features. We probably can use a global like router to make the decision. I haven't fully like consider whether it can land into like these hierarchical solutions. I can give one example. Like if some gateway like to support the fallback mechanisms, right? And uh, and uh, and there's also some intelligent router do the model selection. For example, like people doesn't care about the like which model to serve the request. Choose the least the busiest ones, or like the one I think like cheapest. So those it needs some coordination at the gateway level. But if gateway itself it doesn't have an extension service to make such like a decision, that would be hard because right now the like the extension server is at the like the service level. There's no global coordination, so that's probably some downside of the such design. But I won't say it's it's a one-way door design because the global part can I think can have a global like a coordinator like extension as well. So that probably solve such problems. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what
no, that's you're absolutely entirely right that even in this model, you could have the XProc be globally aware, right? We've been trying to find a model where we could have some higher level abstraction make a zonal or locality pick just to help with availability, but you're completely right that you could have this be fully aware. The reason we've been thinking about this is, if we ever want to, cross localities, have like this global view of the world where you have multiple regions or anything like that, right? Then you have some higher level construct that can do that.
I also think our scope, we really tried to call this out, is focused on multiplexing of use cases where these sound like valid concerns, but I think there are already other AI gateways solving this problem. And our hope was to work with them. That's my understanding. I mean, someone correct me if I'm wrong here, but the hope was
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking with some of the maintainers on the Envoy Gateway side, and they already have a product I think they call Envoy AI Gateway that they've been working with, integration with Kserve, for example, which is awesome. And this is really kind of a different integration point than that, but I think they work pretty neatly together.
Right, and I know that initially I said like LLM server pool is a base model, but that's not. I'm not sure if that is something, fixed in the API. I'm trying to think if you can still use the API to represent multiple base models in the same LLM server pool and do the multiplexing that Jashin, you're talking about.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So long as every model server within the LLM server pool can serve the same set of LoRa adapters, we don't care. And in fact, but we don't even enforce that. You'll just get an error otherwise, because assume that each model server within the pool has an equal chance of being selected for scheduling.
Yeah, what matters is the model name, right? Like at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can have the model name the same, right, on two different base models. And that's how you would.
Yeah, agree here. The API doesn't make that assumption. Just want to share that I'm also working on a doc, just talk about the kind of the model server protocol to work with Gateway. I think one thing I'm thinking is, so today VLM has an endpoint of kind of list the models, basically what models are registered. So we can potentially make that a protocol that if model server tells us what models are available, then the gateway will check only route to those servers that has that model supported. So that could be one way to enhance this, and rather than just assuming everything will go through, we'll do some validation.
And I think we're about at time, which I think is a great segue. I think, Song, you're planning on talking about this more next week. We can have you lead that discussion if you want next week, focusing on the model server integration proposal, because we're kind of in the middle, right? We need to integrate with these gateways and with the model server. So this was gateway, and then, yeah, if you want to run that next week, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, one quick comment here. V1 models endpoint is we think that's the part of the OpenAI compatible APIs. That's definitely works in this case. And in VLM community, I added a PR to show the LoRa lineage of the models, and also potentially models in one single engine. So I can share the PR, and you probably can leverage those metadata exposed from the engine to make more decisions. Yeah.
Cool. That'd be awesome. All right. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you next week.
Thank you all. See you.